what I've done with the digital video. You can move the cursor along, and the moment that you're talking about
is there.
Yeah. And then what we refer to as kind of empathetic resonance. That I've done it so many times now, where the moment where the quality of, and it is a gaze sometimes, often, and we saw it with Georgia, in the restaurant. So I think there's that, it does, and that's transformed my research really, because I can integrate that.
And you can get, with a movie, you would get a very poor quality image of that. It would be, but with a digital image, it's still very sharp.
So I've really been delighted with that. In fact, that's what I really enjoyed about your presentation, on Saturday, because whilst you were talking about what you were doing, do you refer to it as careers management, or what would you say?
Well, that's an interesting question, actually. The more common phrase is career development. And my reading of what people mean when they say career development is that the career development is what we encourage to happen in other people's lives. So the teacher or the counsellor or the advisor is looking for ways of developing the career abilities of that person. So that might be defined in terms of employability or competitiveness or matched to economic requirements or understanding of the labour market or some such notion. And all of that, I think, would come broadly under the heading of career development. What has happened, I think, certainly in UK society, but from what I read worldwide, is that people have become much more assertive of their own ability to find things out, to set things in motion. And I think you need another term for that. So I regard career development as the expertise which people can bring to a career situation. And I don't reject that. I don't minimize or try to undermine that in any way. I think that's important. But we need another term for what it is that the student or client is doing. And I think that is career management. What they are doing is managing their career. And career management, I think, is often based on their experience. And career expertise is based on their experience, but also on their training and the theories and the research and development model, which has arisen from that. So I constantly assert this distinction between career development and career management. Career development is what we do. Career management is what they do.
Well, that's what I really like, because what you were communicating was that something very different to what I'd ever experienced in terms of my understanding of, like, for example, career development, where it felt that you were bringing, and it may sound strange to say this, but a kind of spiritual quality about the life that people live. So where you were bringing, it felt to me, into the notion of career, into what I would be calling a kind of vocational commitment to a particular quality of life that was productive for the individual. That's what I felt on a Saturday night, and it was startling for me, because I hadn't heard that, and I hadn't felt that in terms of a career's development, because it had not had that exciting sense of the individual being encouraged, basically, to find something, a sense of purpose, which was grounded in their whole well-being. So that's what I was, for me, you were communicating.
I think I've got to say that spiritual is not my favourite word. I'm not completely sure I know what it means, spiritual. It's something ephemeral, it's something deep and hard to understand, it's something intuitive. So I would rather use the words ephemeral and intuitive than the words spiritual. But and those words are not necessarily a good thing. Spirituality is universally thought of as a good thing, you see, I suppose, anyway, certainly by people who would claim it for themselves. But I do hold very strongly to the notions of meaning and purpose. However, I tend to go in another direction, looking for explanations of what I mean by that, and I know I'm not there yet. But I do have some notions about how, let's say, evolutionary thinking helps us to understand what it means to attribute a meaning to an event. Now, you can do that at a very mundane level. You can do that at the level of, is that moving thing there alive or not? You know, is that moving thing there dangerous or not? Does that moving thing there mean that I should sit still or run? You know, is run or hide? And that's attributing meaning to this thing that these signals that I'm receiving. They mean something. And that's at a very pragmatic level. It's a very, very, very basic level, and none of us can survive unless you know traffic lights. I mean, you need signals to let you know what's going on out there.
Yeah.
But it can the fact that we have that in our repertoire means that we can go on asking ourselves, yes, but what does that mean?
Yeah.
And what does that mean? And you're going deeper and deeper and looking for deeper and deeper explanations. So why would it want to attack me? And so does that mean that I must run away? So and what does that mean? I mean, there are all kinds of ways in which you can take that simple, mundane repertoire that, as a species, we all have, and it becomes. This is the golden bough. This is. I can't remember the name of the author for the moment, but this is the way in which spirituality is really quite commonly explained, and I like those explanations. They help me to be specific and fairly concrete.
Okay, so if I just explore this a little, because what I was feeling as you were speaking, and I felt your presence in that space, and it was attractive in the sense of when people came up to you afterwards.
Yeah.
I think they felt safe to just approach you. There was something that
Oh,
I was bringing in, and this may sound, I was too idealistic, but I was influenced by Paul Tillich's notions of what he called the ontological security, where he talked about the state of being grasped by the power of being itself.
Yeah.
So when I was saying about the spirit, and because I don't have any theistic faith myself, but I see or feel in people a particular an energy that seems to be life-affirming. So when you talk about the meaning,
I would love to believe that about myself.
Yeah.
Life affirming. Yes.
You know, so it was that, and there is a mystery of the ultimate, you know, where you keep going back and saying why, but it was feeling that that was what was being communicated to me anyway, and I just wanted just to chat to you about it.
I think, truthfully, I think that that's always for other people to say. I think from inside this experience that I'm having on my own life, I wouldn't feel able to make that kind of claim. But what I am aware of is that I'm interested in knowing what people's reactions are to what I say. I know I'm always interested in that. So you look for that. You search their eyes. You search their posture. You look any non-verbal signals that they're giving you, and then any word that they say, and the tone of voice in which they say it. And I think I do tend to take that as a totality. It corresponds with this looking at things which some people might call spirituality in terms of their depth, their reach. And I think I do that.
Well, that was what was
communicated. Are we talking about the same thing?
I think so, you see, because I was mentioning to you that something that again impressed me was Fukuyama, where in the end of history, in the last man, he brought in this notion of thymos, which I'd never heard of, and it was actually the primary sense that's so important about recognition, about the idea that you are recognised by another. So whilst you're saying you respond, it just feels to me that what you were communicating was, if you like, a genuine recognition of the humanity of the other, or that sense of that desire to enable that person to express themselves in a way that they found meaningful. and productive. That was what I was communicating, and I just wanted to talk, you know,
I don't think any of that means the same as nice.
No, no.
I told you about this head thing. I mean, I don't think that before I got hit on the head, and I went for, and had a right brain experience, I suddenly became nicer. But I don't think nicer is my default state. I'm capable of being very angry. I like to think that I'm not aggressive.
Yeah.
That I'm capable of. I've got quite a lot of anger. And so people can be uncomfortable. Well, you've watched me do it actually here this week. I'm quite capable of saying and doing and being things that will upset people. And that doesn't bother me that I'm upsetting people, but I don't set out to upset them. But if they're being upset as part of this experience, well then this is the experience that we need to have now, so let's share it.
Yeah, no, again, I've been influenced by a notion of authenticity. It just feels to me that anger, and they get it really legitimate to be angry, you know, and express that. The authenticity of the person.
I think I would go as far as to say I don't think there's enough anger in the world, actually. I think there's too much aggression.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's enough anger. We don't get angry. I think it's immoral not to be angry. We're talking about Wilberforce.
Yeah.
I mean, it's immoral not to be angry about that. It's you know.
I suppose, again, fascinating me about what I focus on in relation to values, because it just feels to me that if we can just find a way of spreading, for example, the kind of influence I felt you were having on Saturday, what is it, if you like, attracting me at the moment in terms of the research that I work on is how might we spread the influence of those values as far as possible, because it seems that that's what makes the world a better place to be. And that, you know, we're talking about breakfast, weren't we, with Frank and also with Janae, about how do we do that? And this is why this medium with the video, and then just say, well, look, these are the values that we're trying to live. It's almost like, can you come and share? And
I also rely on that. I mean, I think I'm not sure if I'm ready for that question. I mean, what it is a shift from meaning to purpose, and I think that is a shift.
Yeah.
And I think that although you can be right and wrong about whether that's a tiger or whether it's just a lightning shade on a tree trunk, you can be right and wrong about that. You can be right and wrong about meaning. But when it comes to purpose, that is something that you're inventing for yourself. That is something that you are creating. So what I am going to do is, and I like the philosophies which say you need a repertoire of possible ways of responding to this, and the broader your repertoire is, the more options, the more multiple your grasp on reality. It's Daniel Dennett, this is. The more multiple your grasp on reality, then the freer you are to develop a purpose which will take you to something that you can value. But then that's taken us on now to another step in this unfolding of experience. So this is what it means, and this is why this is what I mean to do about it, and this is why I attribute a value to that. So that brings us exactly to where your question was starting from. What is it that causes us to believe that one line of action is more valuable than another? I know why it's more valuable to me. And I don't think we do it in terms, let's say, of quiz work training, by talking about principles or talking about philosophies. I think we do it by probing the terms in which people talk about things. So careers workers, for example, like to think of themselves in the UK as being impartial. But what does impartiality actually mean? It's a form of independence, it's a form of freedom, it's a form of being able to make up your own mind. And this is the way you're going to do this. But are you sure that you're that free when you're being impartial. Maybe you're paying attention to some people's interests more than to other people's interests. Maybe you're paying attention to careers where professionalism's interests. That claim of impartiality goes over very well with politicians. We look good if we can claim to be impartial. But as a matter of fact, we use quite a lot of labour economics, which works on the assumption that market forces are the dominant consideration in career management, so people ought to learn to be competitive. Do we buy all that? And as a matter of fact, do we know that's what we're doing? We're buying all that without even examining it, whether that's a valuable, or even whether it's the only way of looking at what people do.
Well, that sounds... I'd like to come back to what you say about the question about purpose, and you're not feeling very ready for that, but I associate what you've just said with a movement that has been really very significant about critical theory.
Yes,
so
indeed.
that sense of becoming aware of the basically the socio-historical, socio-cultural, the economic, that is absolutely at the heart of the critical theory, which I really feel is so significant. Now, when you were talking, I was thinking, okay, now, Marx's term came to mind as you were talking, that philosophers interpret the world, the point, however, is to change it. And I always say, well, no, the point is to improve it. We can always change things, but you want to try and develop things better based on certain kind of values. Now, that sense of purpose that you have, where you said, well, I'm not quite ready for that question. I'm just curious about, when you started to respond, I felt, now I'm in the presence of a philosopher at this moment. That it felt to me that...
it's possible.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be a philosopher.
Well, that's how it was feeling, and that attracts me as well, because I do like to engage in, philosophy is very important. And then there's something else, which is this idea that if you look back on a life and you say, okay, this sense of purpose is very important. And I want to be able to look back and say, yes, that was a worthwhile form of life, that if I look at the influence that I've had and what I've been doing, and therefore it connects, I think, to what it is you're doing in practice. So this idea that the values emerge, they become clearer in the course of their emergence, which I got from this guy, Paul Feyerabend, and it's always been wondered about the early 70s about against method. So it's that idea that as you're living, like you were doing on Saturday, you were authentically, I think, communicating what you value. And as you were doing it, that was becoming clearer to me what it was that sense of purpose was grounded in. So it was just those,
you made a lot of links that I do recognise, and I think that's right. I mean, I wish I were a better philosopher. My son is a professional philosopher, so I know how poor I am. I know how bad I am at philosophy. But I have got, Daniel Dennett is one of these, one of them. Peter Sloterdijk, he's German, but he's got a Dutch, his dad was Dutch. I'm not sure if I've got that name quite right, but he's a pragmatist, and I do see myself as a pragmatist. I think the ontology is important, about the ways in which we have of grasping what is going on, or our experience of assigning meaning to what is going on. He's very strong on epistemology, which brings your critical thinking notion is, and I'm really pleased to hear people talk about that. I think there is not enough critical theory in either professional careers work or in youngsters' schooling. The idea, the art of being able to ask awkward questions is it can be acquired, and teachers can model it. They can allow youngsters to join in the experience of asking awkward questions of anything, in any subject, at any stage. And I wish we would do more of that.
The one that I found myself asking, and it created a lot of problems, I suppose, for me, probably because I asked it in a very aggressive way, but I would go over to the American Education Research Association, and some of the key people would be giving a paper. And I started to ask, do you have any evidence that anything you've done has influenced the learning of anybody? Okay, so, it was that feeling that, and it was a genuine question, it was authentic, but it was often taken to be hostile, and it wasn't intended to be.
Well, why would it be? No, it was very constructive.
Yes, it was meant to be. Well, you've been giving us all these theories, but do you have any evidence that, linked with anything you've done with your students is, and I then put educational influence in learning, because you can learn many things that are destructive and socially, I say evil. I mean, we know historically, like, I was born in the end of the last war, so a lot of what was happening in socialist, nationalist, socialist Germany was, they learned a lot, but they also learned to exterminate people. So I always put educational influence in front of learning. So it's this feeling that what I felt were offering us on Saturday was, I genuinely, there was a passion. There was a real passionate commitment to enable people to get in touch with their own sense of purpose.
This is true. I'm not. I think you're right about that.
It felt to me that if I was to say, well, look, I'm fascinated by the nature of your influence. You see, because it said to me,
what you're recognising in me, I recognise in myself, and I think my first degree is in theology. We talked about that. I'm not sure whether I had those interests because I took theology, or I took theology because I had those interests. And I suspect it's the latter rather than the former. So all of that is true. But the issue of where questioning, critical thinking, being a nuisance comes into that is something which needs to be linked into that discourse in ways that I'm not completely sure that I've got right. And when it comes to would I know that, for example, what I did the other day, and what you're talking about, has had, in terms of other people's learning, right now, I couldn't tell you whether it has or whether it hasn't. I could hunch, and so could you, but frankly, Jack, I don't think either of us could know.
No, and we can't.
No.
And that, again, is what fascinates me about, if you like, quite a lot of the work I do, which goes on over years. So I like Habermas's 4 criteria of validity, and the last one is about authenticity. He says, you really can't judge the authenticity of someone literally in the moment. It's only over time and interaction that you begin to sense. So it's this notion of the influence. That's what was really fascinating me about our conversation over breakfast with, when you think of from Turkey, with Jeanette from Turkey, Franco from Italy, ourselves, the UK, could we possibly, almost like in a cooperative way, work in a way that might just help to extend the influence of what it was we were valuing? Because you can't, you're right. I saw you, and that was what was attracting to me, because my intuition was, if we can bring these values of yours and a sense of purpose and spread their influence more widely, it was this feeling, well, the world does become a better place to be. That was what I was really interested in.
But do you think that the fact that a person is being authentic, which in part means being disclosing, and that's taking a risk, I mean, that's allowing people to know more than they would know if you were less demonstrative, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Do you think that is that can be acquired from an example, in a role modelling way?
I find all the doctorates that I've supervised now, there are 30 odd of them over the last 16 years that have gone to completion. Every one of them has got an autobiography of their learning, where when you look at the sense of purpose, they will tell stories which I was privileged to hear, because it always felt that I was being let into a narrative of a person's existence which really mattered to them. Now, over time, if trust is there, I've always found that those stories emerge. Now, there are boundaries, so you don't push. People feel free to reveal whatever it is that they matters to them. But I've always found some of the most profoundly significant events can be told you. You know, there's your notion of the storyboarding, the story. So that's what I found. You know, that the
narrative.
The narrative, yeah.
Well, I mean, what you say, so many hairs running, I don't want to chase all of them. but it's, I mean, yes, I do see that, and I mean, we're stepping on from critical thinking. We're asking questions about disclosure, and we're coming across the notion of, well, can I tell you my story? And one of the links, one of the hairs that's running that I want to chase just for the moment is that if career management, as distinct from career development, if career management is an important articulating principle for the work that we do, what people do is their experience. Career management is of their experience. They are what they're doing is calling upon what has happened, trying to understand it, wondering what that means that they should do about it. All of that is an experience, and it's an experience in which one thing leads to another, and in which there are episodes, and in which there might be turning points. I didn't do this, I could do that. And in which there are consequences, and in which there are other people who've got points of view on that. These are all narrative concepts. They are all about, or all of those things that I've just mentioned are things that fall into a story very, very readily. They're not the analytical things, which is, have you got enough of these and those qualities, or abilities, or achievements, which are listed and analysed and sorted out into categories, which is what career development very largely, it seems to me, talks about. It's another way of thinking. And of course the evolutionists, I think, really do take the view that narrative is our default condition. We learn more from narrative than we learn from... So that takes us back into the classroom. And it's exactly, I think this is exactly your point, isn't it? So what is it that is happening in the classroom that causes a person to feel that really could make a difference to my life? And what I'm doing, in very crude terms, is saying, well, is it coming up with a list of historical facts and an analysis of that, and a way of understanding where there might be some causes and might be some effects in those things, and giving that a scientific thing and locating it in a geography and expressing it through a language? Or is it best understood in terms of, well, that's what happens to me, and that's what happens to me, and this is how I feel about it, and my thoughts when I'm feeling about that are, and I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do about it, but I think it might be. That's narrating.
It is. No. It's that. I went with a head teacher in Bath at the moment called Peter Mount Stevens, and that is his point. As a head, he says, I feel that I'm part of everybody's story within the school, and they are part of my story. And it's that feeling of the community with the narratives, building in that kind of shared way. And what you were saying then, it moves between what excites me about what you were offering, as I said, because I will go back to that, I'll get on your website, because in my language, and again, that we got skipping about scaffolding, you gave a way of narrating, which I found very helpful. In other words, you brought something else into my own understanding, which I think I'm going to find very helpful, which was that sense of the scaffolding of a narrative. Now that, when I talk about methodology, I think that what you were doing then was enabling people to understand how. So that how, which was really great, because I said to you that. I think that is what I have certainly been able to use. That's great.
In terms of getting something, I mean, you've reminded me of something actually, which something was said to me long, long ago, which was, thanks, Bill. This was at the end of the workshop session, and again, I don't quite know what that person learned, but what I remember about what he said is, he said, thanks, Bill. He said, I knew the music, you taught me the words. And I mean, I don't think it is just words, but I think one of the things that I think I would like to have been able to do in that session you're talking about is to provide people with a new vocabulary. Because we talk about that's only talk. I never say it's only talk. if you can't talk the talk, you will not know how to walk the walk. You know, it's people get that round the wrong way.
Yeah.
They do. They get it around the wrong way. I mean, it's they say that you don't talk the talk, walk the walk. No. If you haven't got words which will do justice to your thoughts and feelings in this situation, so that when other people hear you use those words, you are closer to them and they are closer to you.
No, I think you just said what it was that was so attractive about Saturday.
Yeah.
That, first of all, I felt, there's an authenticity. And then there was this capacity to put the words in a way that resonated with the experience and the meaning that was coming from the experience, and that was very exciting.
Yeah.
So,
We're standing. Yeah, I feel actually that we've just touched on that. It's that notion of. I think I'm better at running workshops than I am at doing keynote speeches, and we've been talking about a keynote speech. But the thing about a workshop is that you can look around and you can see people's responses. It's body language, it's posture, it's the way they position themselves. It's all the things you're talking about in what you've noticed in me. The way they position themselves in the chair, it's where their eye contact is going.
Yeah.
It's school, it's how they're gazing out the window. I mean, I'd rather be out there than in here. So and what you can do is listen to what they say in the context of how they are saying it. So it's not just the vocabulary, it's a whole series of syntactical and dramaturgical signals that you're receiving, which I suppose would have the general heading of body language, which you can unify in some way. Now, I think that has to come back to them as, you seem to be saying that, or do you mean, or not, I see, this is what you're saying. I don't think you can ever say that, or this is true or it's not true. I don't think you can ever say that. But I think you can always find a reflective way of responding in a and then hand it back to them and say, now you tell me whether you recognise that and how you want to change that. I like workshops more than I like keynote speeches for that reason.
What you said, it just brings to mind that it's someone that I'm working with, but you know when you feel oh God, I'm inadequate here, do you know? I've got she's called Sheila Haytreed, and she's just done 2 master's units, and she has the most amazing capacity to respond from a passion for social justice. So she works with black and minority ethnic groups and elderly Afro-Caribbean groups, elderly women mainly in Bristol. And then she will come, for example, with a manuscript about the Bhopal disaster in India, which is still, which the results are still going on. But her whole being cares about this in a sense of, I don't like the word holistic, but she has a way of connecting which is authentic, and it feels linked to what I was trying to say about spreading influence, because her whole passion, she goes, she acts, she will work with, and I'm just feeling at the moment when I can't quite get the language like you're saying, because I feel if I could help to make this public of what it is that she's able to do, it will inspire others to see how they too could relate, in those ways. So I think what you just said there is really high, it's very significant. And in fact, I'll take this and actually share this with the group, if this is okay with you.
Sure.
Because it's...
I'd like some feedback, actually.
I will. No, I think that's really vital. But that's what, as I say, I was attracted on Saturday because that's what you were doing. You'd found that way of genuinely relating the meaning of the words to your own, the existential purpose that you were living. And there was literally that direct relation. It was wonderful, you know, I felt, because usually, no, it was. You usually get this separation. And especially, you know, because I did the 2 years of analytic philosophy, you often get this separation between what the individual is living and then the clarification of the meaning of the concepts, and you can get that complete separation. So that's great. We're okay?
Yeah, we're fine. Yeah, I mean, just very briefly to respond. I think in order to do that, what you're doing is modelling something for people. I mean, and I can remember teachers that were in the schools that I taught in when I was doing the teaching, and I can remember teachers I want to do that. That's what I do. You know. And there was something about the way they went about things and the way they did things and the way they acted and responded to the students that that's how I want to do it. And I think I got far more out of that than any training I ever received. You know, I mean, I know all about Piaget and so on, and I'm much influenced by Piaget. But I think that more too. So I think all of that is modelling. But I think that one of the features, I said it will be brief, and I'm not being brief. One of the things that does occur to me about myself is that in order to be able to take those risks, you have to know that there is going to be a payoff in it in some way. And in order to know that the payoff will be valuable to you, you need to believe that you are not there completely yourself yet. You are not that good that you can afford to stand behind a barrier and say, this is it. I can't do that because I'm not that good. I'm just not that good. And not being that good, I want the feedback. I need it. I can't function without it.
No. And I was selling.
And that's the risk. The risk is disclosure, but the payoff is learning.
It is. You know, because the very first question that I asked, you know, it was the very first lesson in Tower Hamlets. And I'm gone, you know, the kind of middle class expectations, you know, and I was a disaster the first lesson. Oh, God. And so I went back with that question, you know, God, I've got to do this better. How do I do this better? How? And that was that feeling, and it's remained with me, that question. How do I improve what I'm doing? And it's like this with Sheila now. And I found something in what you were saying. You know, I think that I can now do this better. So I think
that really is. That really is absolutely wonderful.
Well, thanks for
that. That's great. I enjoyed that.
Right.
And when you got the movie, if you could send me bung it to me.
No, I can get that onto YouTube, and then I'd like very much to work this through with.
I mean, put it on YouTube. I mean, you know, if I made a complete fool of myself, somebody will learn something.
You haven't.